been quite a while since we've seen this black and white monitor, huh? Yeah. So we're back. We're going to be revisiting this monitor. We're going to be making a whole new video that is basically just going to be a massive improvement over the last one. I'm not really too satisfied with that previous video at this point with the amount of CRT videos that I've made since then. I feel like my quality has improved a considerable amount, and I feel like nowadays with the stuff that I've made, that video doesn't really give a monitor of that caliber justice. So I want to just make a whole redo of it. I'm going to keep that video up. It's still going to sit there because it's very important to me. But this video is just going to be probably the most ambitious one as possible, if that makes sense. It's going to be documenting everything once again. I'm going to try to do it in a better light. I'm going to correct a lot of mistakes that I made in that video too. I actually got a little bit of the specs wrong. We've actually discovered like a pamphlet that has additional info on the monitor that I just didn't have at the time of making the video too. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to go over. First of all, we're going to come back to the specs. So to start off, this monitor is actually 120 kilohertz to 200 kilohertz. I'm not sure where I got the 100 kilohertz. I think I was making a mistake when I was testing out the resolutions on it. I think I thought that I put a 100 kilohertz signal into it because ever since then I just tested over and over. I've been using this thing for over a year now, so I pretty much know almost everything about it. It's 120 kilohertz for sure. The manual here, or not the manual per se, but like this little pamphlet that we found says 120 kilohertz to 200 kilohertz. That's correct, but you can see here that the refresh rate on the vertical side says 50 hertz right there. It's not 50 hertz. It goes down to 34 hertz, which is painful, but it goes down to 34 hertz. Anything below that, it's not going to do. It does not go to 120 hertz either. It goes up to 169. Anything above that does not display. I don't know why it says 120. Like, I don't know why the horizontal is correct, but the vertical is just not correct, period. It's just not accurate. I don't know. It's very weird, but I can guarantee you for sure that the horizontal spec is correct. It's 120 to 200. Anyways, the bandwidth is 550 megahertz, and I obviously can't really prove that wrong. That seems to be correct based on like what I've sent it in terms of resolutions and all that stuff. So I believe it, especially because, you know, it's a super high horizontal refresh monitor. It's gotta have a lot of bandwidth, right? I think 550 is pretty accurate from what I've seen as well. And the size, of course, 21 inches, 20-inch viewable, might be 19.8 inches. I haven't really measured it precisely what the viewable size is, but it looks to be 20 inches. And the phosphor type, we did not know this last time. This is from the product brief that obviously we found after the video was made. So yeah, P45, it's a phosphor type that is used. It is very, very, very highly responsive. There's no phosphor trails at all in the tube. So it's probably one of, if not the most clear looking displays, because CRTs are known for the motion clarity, and obviously that has to do with the response time that comes from the phosphors and, you know, all that shit, refresh rate, all that obviously equates to how clear the motion clarity is going to be. And by having a phosphor type like this that is so fucking responsive and fast that you don't even get trails, it looks insane. It literally looks unreal. Like, you can track everything. It's literally better than a normal CRT. It's fucking insane. And the weight, to be more accurate, this is also from the product brief, is 72.75 pounds, around there. It states 32 kilograms. I just converted it to pounds just to appeal to freedom unit. Inputs, just 3 BNCs, one for the video or the signal, whatever you want to call it. The horizontal and vertical sync if you combine it into one BNC input, and then the vertical sync if you're using one for the horizontal, one for the vertical, stuff like that. So that's the specs. Very nice, very high end. Now we're going to turn our attention to the actual unit. We're going to be looking at the front of the monitor first. So we have right here a ambient light sensor, this door that I have flipped down that reveals the serial port and a USB-A port, and then we have the contrast up and down, brightness up and down, and then the power button with the LEDs that indicates whether it's on or not. And then we got this little wrench button that controls the geometry, vertical size, position, rotation, just kind of like an OSD built into one button. You press the button and then the LED lights up to kind of signify what it is on for the mode, and then you use the contrast and brightness buttons to just adjust the intensity of that specific geometry adjustment or position, what have you. Now, this mode was not turned on. It was deactivated in software when I got the monitor, so I was not able to use it, which is why I was primarily seeking out that software, because I was just not able to adjust a single thing with the monitor besides the contrast and brightness. And now if we go to the back side of the monitor, we have an IEC port, just the standard power cable, got a USB-B that is obviously for powering the USB-A port on the front panel, and then you have the RG11 ports right there for server controlling and all that stuff for functions of the monitor. And then you have your BNC inputs right here as well for actually making the damn thing screen displays something. And that's about all there is to cover on the specification side of things. So now I'm going to go to the insides of the monitor once again. We're going to go over the whole thing that I went over the last time I made the video on this thing of how it was arcing, having issues, etc. And then a thing that I brought upon myself because I was a dumbass who was not paying careful enough attention on what I was doing when I was taking apart the monitor. I'm also going to take it apart again for this video, which I swore I would never want to do again because it was such a fucking pain in the ass. It sucked. But I feel like it's kind of deserving of this monitor to really show what's inside there and how truly overbuilt this thing is, because nobody has really seen the insides of something like this before. And it's kind of important to show what it's like in there just because of how overbuilt these things were for what they were trying to accomplish with them when it comes to showing x-rays and high resolution shit. So I'm gonna give it justice this time. So bear with me while we go into the insides of this fucking monster. Here we go. So it's time for the insides of this thing, right? So obviously, as I stated in the previous video, I had this thing shipped out from eBay. I sent an offer. It was super expensive, and I was like, you know, I'll just send this in, see what happens. Hopefully I can get it that way. And they accepted it, so it shipped over from several states away. When I bought it, the listing was for parts only and stuff like that. They couldn't really get the thing to display a picture, and the bezel had this, let's call it an issue. Yeah, we'll call that an issue. And I decided I was gonna fix it when it arrived, if it even worked. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I just said, fuck it. We've never seen these things. Let me just get it and see if I can make it work. So it comes in, I'm trying to turn it on, because before I put any work into it, I want to obviously make sure that the monitor actually functions before, you know, I waste my time doing stuff with it. So I futz around for like 30 minutes or so. It was very difficult to try and get it working because I was setting up resolutions. And at the time, I wasn't really too sure because of the documentation on what the minimum frequency was for this thing. So I had to keep trying to send it over, and after a little bit, I managed to turn it on, and I'll show this video that has my reaction. This was back when I was in college with my roommates, so we were all huddled around this thing freaking out because nobody has ever really seen this before. We were freaking out on how high quality the screen looked, just in terms of the clarity and all that stuff. Holy shit!
Oh my god! You know,
it looks so fucking. This is CRT.
You should. No, there's this movie called The Lighthouse. That's black and white.
Yeah.
That was you should totally fucking watch that.
Oh my fucking god! This is crazy.
And it's a square, right? I think The Lighthouse is.
It's shot in like a specific aspect ratio. Yeah. Wait, look up the Lighthouse.
It's so bright,
look
too.
Up the Lighthouse movie trailer.
Yeah. It's very nice to look back on that. And yes, the Lighthouse did look really nice on it. There's for some reason not a 4K version of it though. That really pisses me off. But regardless, it looked very nice. And the thing is, amidst all of this stuff, I noticed it was arcing a little bit. And it was going blurry when that happened as well. So I was getting a little bit concerned because obviously this is a monitor that I am not going to be able to find replacements for. It's not, I mean, maybe I can, but it's really not going to be a realistic thing. And so I want to try and see what's up with it. So I decide it's time to take apart the monitor, might reapply the dielectric grease on the anode cap because I'm sure it's been a bit, maybe see if there's anything else in there, maybe it's a little bit dusty, if there's something that's going to be very obvious when I open it up to diagnose what's going on with the arcing, but I had to open it up to find out obviously, so I started doing that. And yeah, if you saw the previous video, you know what's about to happen. So opening this thing up really sucked. It was not easy, it was not fun, the entire process was just a giant pain in the ass. First of all, taking the case off was very annoying, and then once I got that thing off, there were screws literally everywhere. I had to take all the screws out, and then there were rivets instead of screws, and I obviously didn't want to really destroy the rivets because I just don't want to risk that with a monitor like this. I know I can drill them, I know I can just put them back in if I get like a rivet gun or whatever. I didn't really want to bother, so my only option was to disassemble it from behind and just go through and get to the tube because the anode cap was up against the metal shield on the left side that had one of the boards on it. So getting through that was a giant pain. I'm going to show the photos, just like I did last time, of the entire process, just to kind of summarize the whole trip. So here we go. yeah, that wasn't fun. So what happened, right? The tube I had fall forward, like into my lap, just so I can get it out of the chassis, right? And I didn't notice that little connector that you saw at the very end of that montage there, that little blue connector. I did not notice it was still connected to one of the main boards. And so when I had the tube fall into my lap, it just yanked it and it tore the entire thing off. So I was fucked, I thought. I thought the monitor was dead. I completely screwed up. And so I had really no other choice but to get it soldered, or else, I mean, is the monitor not going to function with that? I honestly still to this day don't really know what that part of the monitor does. Obviously, I want to make sure that it was fixed because I have no idea. So I obviously didn't really have the soldering skills to get that fixed. I did have a roommate who managed to solder it for me. Hyatt, thank you. To this day, thank you. I can solder, but I cannot solder, even to this day, even though it's been a while since then, I cannot solder something that precise and also that fidgety, because it's like little cables into like a ribbon cable. It's so weird, but he did a pretty decent job. Obviously, it doesn't need to look great, but it works because there's not a function of the monitor that doesn't work. So it definitely worked. It does suck that things had to end up that way, but I mean, at least it's fixed. And then with that out of the way, I was finally able to do the thing that I intended to do the entire time of opening the monitor, which was put fucking grease on the anode cap. Now, did that work? After I put the entirety of the monitor back together, after going through this hell just to make this thing stop arcing? Well, there's view, and it fucking arced. Yeah, so it didn't even work. Great, right? Yeah, so that sucked. But I mean, at the very least, I got to get inside the monitor and get to see it, which was pretty cool, and kind of work around it and just kind of get to know it through doing that. So I guess it was a learning experience in some ways. If anything, it taught me to not be fucking careless when opening up a monitor that has never been documented. That's for fucking sure. But in the midst of all of this, I did manage to clean up the entirety of the case and also fix the broken bezels. So was actually very good looking at the very end of everything, because it was not very, but it was a little filthy, and it had some stuff on it. It had some grime, and obviously the bezel had that issue that was shown in the eBay post, which I did fix by just using some Gorilla Glue, and it has not had an issue since. There were also some scuffs that I managed to get away using some magic erasers. That shit's magical. It's in the name. Use magic erasers for shit like that. It goes hard. Get a magic eraser, please. So that's that. Now, unlike the last video, I'm now going to show new footage of me opening up the monitor and taking a look at all the stuff inside. I'm obviously not going to do a full disassembly because screw that shit. This is literally the most painful thing I've ever taken apart. Still to this day, there has been nothing that has topped that. I don't want to deal with that again, but I will show you how overbuilt the monitor is on the inside and just all the parts on the boards and stuff like that to the best of my ability. Like I said, I'm not going to go bare bones on it, but see the flyback, see the capacitors, all that stuff, just to, you know, get a better in-depth look on what the inside is like, rather than just like a couple photos and all that stuff. So we'll get to that part now. So literally all you have to do to take the case off, I don't know why I said it was hard earlier, you just take 2 of these screws out and then you just pull it off. Once you do that, there's going to be a ton of screws holding in the top shield here. You just want to remove those and then it's going to slide right off. This is the tube sticker that has all the information about the tube itself, like manufacturer, serial number, all that stuff. And if you remove this back shield, you get to see the entirety of the neckboard assembly. This is the best that I can do so we can see the flyback. I'm not gonna take the entirety of the monitor apart just to see it. It's just not really worth the hassle. You can see from these angles that I got that the flyback is pretty massive though, and I really wish we could see it. Maybe someday, but not right now. Alright, now that we're done with that, we're gonna go to SMfit ACT. It's, you know, the software that is used to calibrate this monitor, adjust it, etc. So I'm gonna go into the whole story of actually how I got the software, because I didn't really go in depth on that last video. And then obviously from there, I'm gonna transition to showing the software off, the adjustments that it allows me to use, and all that fun stuff. So without further ado, let's do it. So as I kind of stated previously in the video, I was not able to use the monitor's geometry adjustments and position adjustments, horizontal size, vertical size, etc. because it was all locked behind that little wrench button, which had to be activated through software. The software can be used with the monitor via that serial port on the front. You gotta use a null modem serial cable for it, RS-232. The only issue is that when I was looking up the software, I could not find a single copy anywhere, like not on archive.org, not on various websites that claim they had the download link. Just no matter where I went on the internet, it was always a dead end, and it would just seem like there was going to be no way to get the software back. So what I had to do was reach out to Siemens. So I send them an email asking for their help. They then respond, kind of go back and forth. They ask for the info. I give them some of the details that I have on the back of the monitor, as well as a photo. They gave me the part number, and they said, obviously, you know, it's end of service life since this date, which is surprisingly late, to be honest. And then they just said there's no software available, and that was just all there really was. So that really sucked. That was a huge dead end. They just didn't really have anything. So I decided to call them. Then this lady on the phone was talking with me for a little bit. We made a joke about how the name of the company is pretty funny. I'm dead serious. She was pretty great. But eventually she told me that it turns out that ISO manufactured parts of the monitor or something like that. So I had to reach out to them. In order to do so, I had to sign up on their support website and just make a case there. And upon doing so, I got a response within like 2 hours. And they just gave me a link to the download just like that. They just literally dropped it right there on me. And I was so damn happy. It was just this weird, like, barren storage link that they just had sitting around on like this really old backup site or something like that. It was very weird, but it was there. I downloaded it. They gave me the password for it, and finally I managed to get my hands on the software. They were unbelievably helpful. Like, they just dropped it there and just call it a day, and it was very straightforward. Now we're gonna go to the actual software and take a tour through it, all the features that it allows me to use with the monitor, the adjustments and calibrations that I can make with it, as well as a couple of extra things that I didn't really cover last time on the previous video, just so we can get a little bit of a bigger coverage of all the things that this software can allow you to do, because it's really in-depth. There's a lot of moving parts to this software. It's very surprising. And guess what? Unlike Windows, it actually works and doesn't treat you like shit. They didn't turn e-waste into software. It really works well. Anyways, let's get to the software. So I'm here in the virtual machine. You gotta use a virtual machine for this just because of the fact that the software cannot really run on modern versions of Windows. So gotta pull it up in a virtual machine for Windows XP. And I right now have my Siemens monitor hooked up through RS-232. I obviously just gotta connect it to the virtual machine. So I'm just gonna right click this here and then hit this right here. Gotta connect that to the host. So that is now in. And then if I just boot up the software, there's this thing you're gonna see pop up. Gotta hit service level 2. There is a service level 1. It doesn't ask you for a password, it just does that. The difference between the two is that service level 2 just gives you more features. So it literally makes no sense to do service level 1. It asks you for a password. The password in this is Moni Lisa. I have no idea what the fuck made them choose that as the password. It's also the password that you enter when you're installing the software itself. You can find it in a little text file that's in the zip file that contains the software. But anyways, going here has this pop up. I just gotta hide this test pattern. I did a thing with this pops up every time. Gives you this window, shows a stupid little monitor thing here. It has my specs right now. I typically run this frequency on the monitor, 134 kilohertz, 60 hertz. This equates to 1620 by 2160p. And of course the monitor is 3x4. It scans that natively. I'll get into that later. Got all these options here. So we're gonna start from the bottom, actually, with this part right here, the preferences. The reason why I'm going over to this first is because it actually houses like everything that you adjust, and I'll show what I mean by that. So the monitor type, I just have selected as Siemens CRT. There's options for like LCD and like other CRT monitors that they made, stuff like that. Obviously it's a grayscale, so I have it like that. The serial port, you know, just you go into device manager to identify it that way. Mine is COM5. There's graphic board right here, like you can change like what GPU you have like hooked up and all that stuff. Obviously it's none of these things. I have a fucking 4070 Ti. It's just using VMware's like emulated graphics card and all that stuff. But there's also this thing for luminance values, so you can have like the minimum and maximum luminance. Now this is truly detected by using the measurement device that you would normally have with this software. It's basically just like a colorimeter, but it's just for light. It'll just read the actual brightness of the monitor just to have that stuff get adjusted. Obviously I don't have that, so we're gonna ignore that. There's also a conformance test, so you can get that shit set up and looking correct. Gamma correction as well, all that. And then measurement device. Obviously I don't have a spot meter, spectrometer, etc. shit like that, but that's for what I was talking about before with the luminance calibration. There's also this toolbox here where you can actually create new profiles, like little like presets of the monitor, which is actually really cool. I'm just using the standard one, but it's kind of nice if you want to like customize or like adjust some shit and just get it saved. And then you can extract like the calibration data when you use like the measurement device and all that stuff. If you have like another monitor, you can add that by doing this too. Then obviously this is just to detect if you connected anything new to the monitor and all that stuff. You can also schedule shit to get done. So if you wanted to, like, you can execute a task like, I don't know, every hour, and then, you know, like a conformance test and say like, you know, haha, funny, I love light, monitor, CRT, funny, hee hee, and then, you know, throw that in there and it's gonna do that every fucking hour. It's crazy what you can do with this shit, but not gonna do that at all. It's a cool thing, right? But yeah, that's the name of the monitor, that's the firmware version on the monitor. And now we're gonna actually start from the top. So you can go to the system, see the serial number, that's mine right there. It also shows it on the back of the monitor and also on the inside as well on one of the shields. There's an error log. I got no errors that are stored. If I did, I would definitely know. It's cool that it logs errors in case something does go bad like down the road, so you actually know what the hell is going on with the monitor. This is the bus address, is just, you know, RS-232 stuff. You can ignore that. This allows you to save the data from the monitor. So this will house like the brightness values, contrast values, geometry settings, what have you. Save that to a file. You can load it back in with that. You can also convert it to an Excel document if you want to look at it that way, or ASCII if you want to look at it that way as well. Selection list. This just allows you to look at like specific parts of the file and all that. And then this is just like if you were to replace the deflection board, like you just load the settings back into it so it can work again. Configuration. This is the shit that I immediately gunned for as soon as I got the software, because this was like this. So I was not able to use that wrench button, so I was not able to adjust the geometry settings and all that stuff. Obviously, I'm going to keep that on. It's nice to have. I don't really use it much because the software is honestly a lot more convenient to me, but if I wanted to down the road, I can just use it through that, so it's pretty nice to have. You can disable certain timings of the monitor too. I don't really know why you would want to, but it's a thing that they allow you to do, so if you wanted to, you know, there you are. This is basically the time between switching frequencies that it'll be off for, I guess. I don't really understand why this is a thing either. Then brightness and contrast, of course. Adjust the brightness. Do it manually through the software here if you don't want to do it through the monitor itself. What's great about this too is that it keeps your previous value saved on the top here. So if you turn out to not like, you know, 107, it's like, oh shit, what was it before? 204. Just put it back there. Contrast minimum you can set right here, so you can keep it to a certain minimum. So you don't want it to go below like 185, then good. It won't do that. Like it says 142, but the level of brightness that the monitor is displaying right now is what it would be at 185, which is nice. Another thing is that if you actually max it out and then you put the contrast minimum to the max, it'll actually run the monitor super fucking bright. And I measured this with the brightness as well up to 255, and it came out to 500 nits, which is fucking insane. That is brighter than most displays that I own. This thing can do HDR kind of, but not really. Anyways, power down an ambient lighting sensor. This just allows you to make it so the sensor is on or off. I don't like it on because it really bothers me when the monitor just changes brightness. Also makes it hard to record it. Power down, this just makes it so you can't turn the thing off or on, so I'm just gonna keep it like that. Pulse length of video clamping just allows you to change the video clamping pulse. So if you just turn this down, you're gonna lose some info because your timings get all screwed up and shit. I just keep it on 47 because it looks great that way. That's also how it was from the start. Jumper settings, you can't really adjust this. This is just to see the jumpers that are on the actual boards on the monitor. Like it says, no changes possible. It's just to show you what's there. I don't know what it means, but it's there, so I'm just gonna leave it. So of course, this is the thing I was the most excited for when it came to getting the software, which is the adjustment section where you get access to the geometry, video amplifier, the focus, the ambient light sensor, even luminance across the screen. So we're gonna start from the geometry one because obviously that is the most crucial thing here. So you can adjust everything from the position, the amplitude, kind of like the linearity, trapezoid adjustment, corners, extra thing on top of that for the corners, the vertical position, linearity. Then you have more over here. We can do like an H-beam offset that kind of like does this. It's very weird. It kind of shifts it side to side. Get the bow, image rotation, vertical linearity for the most part. I mean, it's basically vertical linearity, right? And yeah, so I mean, you can just adjust like the position, just like this. I'm just gonna show a couple things off. It doesn't change when you're sliding it. You gotta let it go and then it'll make the change. You can do this where you just hold the arrow down. It technically does change it live time because it's just going from each increment to the next. So that's that stuff. The trapezoid one is pretty wonky too. Let me find the where's, yeah, this one right here, right? This one? Yeah, this one. This one's pretty nuts. And then obviously, just like before, you have the numbers here that signify what the value was before you touched it. So obviously, I don't want 46, change it over to 255, and it's back to where it was before. Pretty cool thing. Just gotta cancel that because it's okay with where it's at. I would like to adjust it a bit more, but I don't really have the time for that for the video. It'd be a fucking waste. The video amplifier, this is just for like calibrating the black level and all that stuff. I don't need to do that, so I'm just gonna ignore that. The focus is pretty nuts on this. You can adjust the brightness and contrast here independently of the monitor. This is just for the calibration of the focus so you can get it right. Like it says, values will not be stored, so whenever you're done with this, it's not gonna save it. That's pretty nice. The static focus, this is just the typical focus across the entirety of the screen. If I make it all the way down, you can see that the focus gets pretty bad. I'll also change the test pattern over here to, let's do this one, right? So you can see it's pretty bad. Change it to, what was it before? 43, right? Change it to 43. And there you go, it's back to being good. You have dynamic focus as well, so you can adjust it like horizontally on like a specific plane. Same thing with vertical, then the amplitude of those settings as well. And then you have these point-to-point and wave control settings for the stigmatism. Super quick interjection, I did find out how this works by reading the SMfit ACT manual fully. The software has this specific pattern built in. It's a 5x5 grid, just like the controls in the dynamic focus, so each value controls the focus in each exact square. So in order to use that adjustment properly, you have to use the test pattern. Ambient light sensor, this is just for the actual setting itself, like what it will change, how it reacts to the light. I don't have this on, so I don't need to touch this, but it's cool that you can customize how it behaves, so if you did have to use it, you can make it so you don't have to struggle with it. You can make it so it's actually a little bit more appealing of an option, which is kind of nice. And the even luminance, you can just change. I'll put a full white screen on it, right? Bright as shit. So maybe if like the luminance is kind of off on like the sides or whatever, like I can adjust that. Might start to see some things change on the screen. I obviously leave this on default because I don't need to change this because my settings were on default and it looked good just as is. But if your luminance is off, this is how you can kind of correct it. You can see that one actually got a lot worse right there on the bottom, but obviously I don't need to touch that. So diagnostics allows you to, if you have this hooked up to like a server or whatever, see what errors are going on and all that shit and save it to like a file. Obviously I don't have that. I don't have a server hooked up to it, but it's a pretty cool thing too. The toolbox allows you to turn off the deflection, put it on low. You can just power the monitor off. You can put a test line on. I thought that was going to be like vertically collapsing it, but it's not. It doesn't really do anything. You can reset the processor as well. Turn on video service. You can also download and upload firmware to it. I did download the firmware off of it to see if I can get anything. It didn't give me anything to go off of, but it's cool that you can do that if there was like a firmware update your monitor. Gotta cancel that, which does turn off the monitor for a second. It's nothing to be freaking out over. It'll just turn right back on. Yeah, just like that. Info, you can see the version of the software. There's also this thing for operating hours. It changes a lot. I don't know what hours this thing is talking about. I don't know if it's talking about the monitor when it's running, like actually displaying a picture. I don't know if it's saying when it's just plugged in general. I don't know if when it's turned on, but it's not displaying a picture. If it is when the screen is actually on displaying something, that's pretty crazy. If it's been reset since then that sucks. But if that is the actual total amount of hours of it displaying something, then that's very reassuring. This thing is gonna last for fucking ever. If not, then I got no fucking idea. Test pattern is where you can get really nuts. This is going to display on the actual virtual machine because getting the monitor to be hooked up to the virtual machine is a giant pain in the ass because it doesn't know what the hell's going on. But basically what you can do with this, I mean, one, you have access to so many different test patterns for so many different adjustments, even colors. You can also go here and toggle between like all these ones, these things for luminance, and it goes really in depth. Tons of shit here for specific things. There's also resolutions. Go to here. So you can see the max res of something, all that stuff. There's also user-defined ones. So if you wanted to, so if you have your own photos that are like really useful as like test patterns, you can just throw it in there and it's gonna put it up there for you and you can just use that as your own test pattern. So you can just save it to that. You can clear it to get rid of it so it just turns black. Obviously I didn't have anything there, so it's just black already. And then to hide it, this one on. hide it like that, and also show it on all the monitors. It's pretty cool how in-depth that goes. There's also this help button that just gives you like about the actual software, which is not really much to go off of. There is this thing for contents, but I don't have Acrobat Reader. It'll just pull up a PDF that is already within the SMfit ACT folder, so it just is kind of like a shortcut to that. It's already in there. It just has like details about what parts of the software do, how to hook up a monitor, how to set up a server with it. Luminance calibration is just with a tool that allows you to measure the brightness like I mentioned before. If I hit this, it's gonna look for it and it's like, where the fuck is it? I don't have it, so I can't do that, unfortunately. This is just if you were to measure it, what it would save to, like all like the things that you measured. So it's pretty cool that it saves it individually on like what it would be. So like you have your white level, your black level, your gray level measurements all saved to like specific things, so you can check them out each at a time. Reports just has the same thing, like how your shit came out with your measurements and stuff like that. This is just some, I don't really know. It's something I don't think I have to worry about. It's, I guess, server stuff. I don't really know. Constancy test is the same thing in terms of being related to that. I don't really know what these are for. It's probably server stuff. Definitely things that I don't care about. That's pretty much all there is to go over when it comes to the software. It's great that it actually just works and doesn't treat you like shit like Windows, like I mentioned before. They did a great job with the software. It's honestly very well made. So with that part being out of the way, we're gonna go from the software to a couple more extra details about the monitor, and then with that we'll get to some other stuff as well as the content montage that is the best part of these fucking videos. That's SMfit ACT. Love this thing to death. It's a great software. Thanks Siemens for making something that isn't like actually shit. Anyways. Alright, so now it's time to include a bunch of miscellaneous things that can't really have their own chapter or fit in other chapters. So this will be a bunch of stuff like deflection, the motion clarity, and like the phosphor trails and the lack thereof, and the resolvability, TV lines, lines of horizontal resolution, scan lines, interlacing, etc. Just a couple more aspects of the monitor that it has that's kind of unique and special about it. So we'll go over that just to make sure that the majority of the things, if not all, are going to be documented just so we have the information on it. And I'm also not going to be the only one reading this stuff out, so yeah. Anyways, we're gonna get to that now. Alright, we're gonna start with motion clarity. Of course, I mentioned before, a little briefly, the phosphors that this monitor has are different than the average phosphors that are used by normal CRTs, and the one that this monitor uses are P45 phosphors. So they're very different in how they look compared to even other monochrome, just black and white CRTs as well. Of course, the biggest thing that comes with this is the fact that they're going to be very highly responsive phosphors, and because of that, the motion clarity on this thing is unlike normal CRTs. It's even better. And of course, you've noticed that I have the test UFO, the little alien that scrolls across the screen. It's a good benchmark for motion clarity. Now, the main thing you want to focus on this test pattern that I have displayed on right now is the top alien. That one is going to be running at 60 FPS, which is obviously the full frame rate matched with the refresh rate of the monitor right now. I'm just going to be doing this at 60 FPS. Obviously, the video's in 60 FPS. I can't have higher refresh rate or higher frame rate videos on YouTube. Maybe 120 FPS someday, but no. You'll notice that as the alien is scrolling across the screen, you might see some green and kind of purple-ish artifacting dash fringing coming off of it. That is not noticeable in person. It is an artifact on camera that has to do with how responsive the phosphors on the monitor are. It is not phosphor trails, and I will prove that in a little bit, that this monitor does not actually have any visible phosphor trails. But when it does come to that like color artifacting, that greenish purple thing, that is only an artifact that is visible on camera, presumably because of just the phosphor type and the refresh rate being matched and etc. All the, you know, CRT persistence timing stuff with phosphors and refresh rate and all that shit. When it comes to the motion clarity itself, in terms of the clarity and how well you can see text in detail in motion, I have this map test pattern that they have on the same site pulled up right here. Bottom one is going to be 60 FPS, so that's the one you want to put most of your attention to. If we pause the screen, you can see that there is literally no blur, artifacting, etc., whatever you want to call it. It's just a frozen image of everything that you can see on the map there. Text retained, images retained, all that, all details there. Now I'm going to show you that this monitor has no phosphor trails whatsoever. I've got a black screen screen pulled up here because it's easiest to see phosphor trails when there's nothing being illuminated, when there's no emissions. And I've got a little white website here. It's a white page, whatever. I just got that pulled up right here in my browser. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fling it around the screen. I'm going to move it up and down. You notice that there is literally nothing happening when I do this. No trails at all, no artifacting. There's that little green purple thing, obviously I explained that earlier. That is not phosphor trails. You can't see anything. Now, if this is hard to believe, what I can do is I can turn up the exposure on my camera to really show that there is literally nothing trailing behind this window. So when I have it turned up, move it around more, and there's still literally nothing happening. There's nothing showing up at all. It just goes to show how insanely responsive these phosphors are. I don't really know how to measure response time. I can guarantee you it's at least better than normal CRTs, so it's pretty nuts what this thing can do. And super quick, we're gonna also compare it to the test pattern displayed on my Dell P1110. And this comes from the fact that the Dell P1110 is a very high-end PC CRT, but it's just a color CRT. It has a mask, and obviously it's not gonna have the same phosphors that are used in this thing, so it's gonna have the standard response times that most CRTs have. Now, if we kind of do a side-by-side comparison, you can kind of see how the clarity is different between the two displays, even if it is just through video and I'm not using like a pursuit camera to really track it properly in motion. You can still see that there's a difference in how clear the picture actually is in motion. And for shits and giggles, here's how a 4K LCD compares. Now, to compare the phosphor trails, the P1110 to the Siemens monitor, I'm going to do the same thing where I've got a black background and I have the white web page pulled up again. Dragging it around, you might be able to see the phosphor trails. I don't really have the exposure turned up a bunch, so it might be hard to tell, but there is something there that you can kind of keep track of. So what I'll do is I'll turn up the exposure, and it is then that you can actually see that there's a shit ton of trailing. It's obviously not as dramatic in person because you're not going to see the monitor like this, where it's overexposed to all hell and back, but you're obviously going to see a decent amount of trailing there. So if we put both side by side, it becomes very obvious with both videos exposed on how there is trailing everywhere on the P1110, which is basically akin to every other CRT, and then there is literally absolutely nothing on the Siemens monitor. No trailing whatsoever.
So when there's masses and stuff like that that you're looking at on like a display, if there's any variation whatsoever in how it appears on the screen, it could lead to a misdiagnosis or anything. You know, you can't have that. Everything had to be as high quality as humanly possible. The guns are definitely built to higher spec as well. Well, the gun, in this case, singular gun, also helps that there's no mask. The gun can be lower power from what a color CRT with the mask guns have to be because the mask blocks a lot of the light. A monochrome tube, the guns are actually being driven way lighter for much brighter than a color CRT. So that also helps the high voltage load. That's also why they're a lot sharper too, not only because there's no mask, but because the guns are being driven way less for the same brightness. You can see a lot of movement on even high-end consumer sets just because like there was no need for it to be absolutely perfect in a consumer environment. No consumer would ever complain that there was 2 pixels of movement. You know, like there's just not something that was like a problem for the consumers, and there was no reason to put that cost into production for that market demographic. So that's why you see even on high-end CRTs, like consumer ones, yeah, even some professional ones, like the 2070 SB was marketed towards like graphics professionals and stuff, and even that still has a little bit. You have to like pull out a jeweler's loop basically, but like there's still a little bit. It's still nowhere near as perfect as the medical grade displays are because that's what they were purpose built for. That's the difference in target market. Like pretty much everything in the whole B+ high voltage circuit is going to be built to much higher standards. Pretty much everything in that whole line, whether it be the flyback itself, coils, anything, they're all going to be to higher spec in that circuit just because if you don't want any bloom at all, everything's got to be perfect. You have no room for error.
This monitor features an auto black level calibration. Interestingly enough, it doesn't require any external equipment or probes. We don't really know how the feedback system works for it, but according to notes, it works surprisingly well. The calibration activates automatically after 20 minutes of being powered on, allowing the monitor time to warm up for accurate calibration. Calibration lasts about 3 seconds, during which the screen will increase in brightness and a red LED will light up. After calibration, the monitor will return to the desired light level, with the updated black level. The automatic calibration will not engage again until the monitor is power cycled, but it does engage every 12 hours of continuous use. This probe-free automatic calibration is pretty cool, and something I've personally never seen on a monitor before. I wish it was a feature incorporated on more monitors.
So I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea considering the fact that this monitor is very different in terms of the way the inputs are and how it's set up. So I thought I'd show how I have the actual thing set up for interlace resolutions and progressive resolutions because I'm able to do 540 megahertz interlacing on this thing, even though I have a 4070 Ti on my PC. So I'm going to go into the details further, but to show you what I have right here, I have these BNC couplers right here, so just female to female, two BNC 75 ohm terminators, and then this weird, funky looking VGA thing. This is basically an EDID coupler. So what this does is that it has an EDID profile on it, and you can flash it using specific software. So if there's resolutions you want to add to it, you would need a native VGA output, and I had a PC that I specifically built just so I could flash this thing. It really sucked, but it has a lot of the resolutions that I'm using with this monitor on it. I'll explain why that is important later. And then of course the DAC itself, this is standard DisplayPort to VGA. It's a Sunix variant DAC, a DPU 3000. This is specifically the D-Lock 87685, so it goes up to 540 megahertz, which is really good if it's a monitor like this where you're going to be doing very high resolutions, high refresh rates, and all that. Now, this is the real kicker when it comes to getting interlacing to actually work on a GPU like the 4070 Ti. I'm not actually using the 4070 Ti as the video output. You can see right here that I have the DisplayPort on my motherboard that I actually plug the DAC into. This is using my Intel integrated graphics card. I have a 12900K, so it's using whatever the hell the integrated graphics specifically is on that, but it's a 12th Gen i9. So by doing this, I'm able to use the 4070 Ti as the dedicated graphics card that renders everything and gets the work done, while just having the iGPU by Intel do the video output, which helps a ton because interlacing does not work on NVIDIA cards after the 10 series. But it does work on like a 12th Gen i9. I don't know about 13th Gen or 14th Gen. I know there's a little bit of like a driver issue. If you have two recent drivers, something like that, I don't really remember like the specific ones, but that is the thing to keep in mind. So it's not foolproof. Now, before I go in depth on the VGA EDID coupler, this is the setup when everything is hooked up besides the DAC being put into the motherboard. The cable is an Extron VGA to BNC cable. The Extron cables are very high quality, so I'd like to use one of those for a monitor like this just so there's the most minimal possible risk of having any like ringing or noise on the screen or any other artifacts, just because it's going to be doing very high bandwidth analog and I don't really want to deal with any ugly bullshit on the screen. Now, as to why the VGA EDID coupler is important to all this, you see, my PC was not allowing DACs like the D-Lock 87685 to be modified with custom resolutions through custom resolution utility. DACs like these don't show up as their own name and display something along the lines of generic monitor. This was an attempt to make me unable to use this monitor at its fullest potential, or so my PC thought. By using an EDID coupler like this one, I am able to bypass this limitation by tricking my PC into thinking that this DAC does have information, and so it won't show up as a generic monitor. However, I had to have a native VGA output in order to flash the EDID coupler with custom resolutions, because if I flashed it with a DisplayPort or HDMI to VGA adapter, it would flash the adapter instead. So, I had to build a PC with a NVIDIA GT 730 and install Windows and the drivers to it, just so I could do this one thing. After a couple of hellish hours had passed, I managed to use ToastEX's EDID writer software to flash the coupler. I can't do this. This is so fucking stupid. After a couple of hours had passed, I managed to use ToastEX's EDID writer software to flash the coupler with some resolutions that I made. I then plugged it into my PC with the DAC, and I managed to claim victory over my computer. The best part about it all, you might ask, is that I can now easily use custom resolution utility to add and modify resolutions as needed. Bitch. Now to explain why the 75 ohm terminators and the BNC couplers are important to this too. So some DACs, like the DPU 3000 variant DAC that I'm using, will not detect the monitor being connected to it if some of your BNCs are not connected. So of course, because this is a monochrome monitor, it's only going to be using one BNC for the signal. And so, for example, if I have the red plugged into the signal for the monitor, that means green and blue are just sitting there doing nothing. So because of that, the DAC is not going to recognize the monitor being connected. Some do, but if it's a DAC like this one, it's not going to recognize it. It's just how it is. So what I do is I put the 75 ohm terminators on the BNC couplers, screw them down, obviously, just tighten it, and then I put those into the actual BNCs that are just sitting around. So in this case, green and blue. And then everything is good and the monitor is able to be detected by the DAC. Now with that being said, only one of the three colors is plugged into the monitor. So you might notice that things look a little bit off. And you would be correct, because of course, since one color is going to be connected, the rest are not going to show, so you're going to lose out on a lot of color information. So there's a super quick and easy way for me to resolve this that doesn't involve using like a coupler, like a splitter, or just what have you with like the actual cables themselves. It's all on the software side, and it really is easy, because all I do is go into Intel Graphics Command Center, because I have it, of course, plugged into the Intel iGPU. Then I want to hit the display that is actually connected to Intel. It's going to be labeled like this, so I click on that. Then all you have to do is just scroll all the way down here, and you're going to find saturation. Just turn that all the way down to 0. And I'll show you with the footage right here of that I have the monitor. If I adjust it in live time, you can see the colors just pop back into place. And everything actually looks a lot better and looks normal. It's much easier to just fine-tune it through software like this, because if you apply this, it's just going to be done. You don't have to deal with anything like that afterwards, and it all looks normal. Now, as for how I set custom resolutions and refresh rates and what have you, I just use custom resolution utility, abbreviated as CRU. It's by ToastDX, same guy who made the EDID patching software. He's really good when it comes to this stuff. So all I do is just open the application, I select VGA and monitor, because that's what I know my DAC is going to be named because of the EDID coupler that I have in there. And you can see all the resolutions I've already set here. I'm kind of just good to go. I don't think I need anything else, or at least there's not anything else that comes to mind, but these are what I have set. There are also these extension blocks where you can add even more detailed resolutions, which I have clearly done. I've added a shit ton. It's really fun to play around with all like the resolutions here. You can also trim the timings, edit the timings, cut some lines out, do a lot of customization, which is very important with stuff like this, because I actually have edited a lot of the timings to save on some bandwidth, or maybe add more to the horizontal frequency, because this thing has 120 kilohertz minimum. That's very high for a minimum, so you need to really like pump your refresh rate if you want to get lower resolutions to run on this thing, or you got to increase your vertical line count, so it gets a little bit annoying. So once I've set all my resolutions with CRU, all I do is just hit OK, so it closes out the software, and then in the folder that the software came with, there's going to be the reset all, restart 64, restart. I just use restart 64 because it's giving me less headaches, and I assume that's also just because it's for 64-bit operating systems. So when I hit that, it'll restart my GPU drivers along with a couple of other things, and then with that restart, the resolutions will actually be put in. And what I usually do, because with interlacing it can be a little bit finicky, what I do is I go into Windows display options, so just like in the settings, and then I hit display properties, and then I can go to this section where I can list all modes, and it creates some like what I like to call phantom resolutions. Like some of these I just didn't make and they auto generate them or something like that, and when I apply them, they're actually just scaled resolutions of ones that I actually did make. So it's very weird. I think that's a Windows thing, but regardless, the resolutions that I made are gonna be here. And so all I do is just hit one, hit apply, and then it'll ask me if I want it. I'll hit yes again, and then with that my resolution will be applied, so I can change all my resolutions from here.
So since this monitor has such an overbuilt deflection circuit, it has a minimum horizontal bandwidth, which is pretty high. So if you want to send it something like 1080p, you have to add a whole shitload of extra vertical lines to get it to even accept it. So for example, you might be sending it 2,000 lines, but 1080 of them are active, so you can get 1080p on it. That's kind of the frequency range we're talking here, when the minimum is like well above 1080p, and that's the minimum frequency. If you send this monitor that's 3x4 native, 4x3 resolutions, you're going to get a squashed image just because, you know, that's the way it scans the raster out. You can see that by the horizontal scan lines when it's in a portrait orientation. You know, so if you pull up a test pattern image or, you know, whatever, send it 1600 by 1200, it's going to look like super squashed horizontally because it's trying to fit that 1600 into a 1200 width of raster. So that's why it looks fucked up, because it is. Like, you can tell it's 3x4 native because the scan lines are horizontal in a portrait mode orientation. That's also why it has such a high horizontal bandwidth of 200 kilohertz, since your vertical resolution needs to be higher due to the 3x4 native aspect ratio of the monitor. And obviously you'll see scan lines even at high res with this thing because it's got no mask, and the spot size is pretty impeccable on these. So even at extremely high resolutions, you're going to have scan lines. You can clearly see the black gaps even as high as 1920p, which is pretty crazy. Even higher, you know. Interlacing makes the image way sharper at the same refresh rate as a progressive resolution due to the decreased bandwidth. For example, if you have 1440p 85, it's going to look way blurrier than 1440i 85. It's twofold. There's the video amps, the megahertz that's being reduced, and then also the kilohertz horizontal frequency is being reduced as well. And both those together make a much sharper image. Even more interesting, interlacing at a high enough resolution, depending on the monitor, the resolvability of the tube, spot size, and whatnot, an interlaced resolution can look progressive in nearly all situations. It's different for each monitor. For example, like a standard definition consumer set, right? The softer it is, the less interlaced flicker you see. The same concept applies to PC tubes as well, so it's just way scaled up. So for example, on a lot of monitors, 1440i is way past the resolvability. So the distance between the two interlacing fields, each line in the field is like lower than the pitch of the monitor. The fields overlap almost because it's going past the resolvability of the tube. A high enough resolution, you don't really see the interlacing field artifacts anymore. And that's also the case with this monochrome tube, except it's incredibly high. So in this specific example, this monochrome tube, this one, you stop seeing the interlacing artifacts around 3200i, which is extremely high. Because this monitor is 3x4, that's why I'm saying 3200i. It's not a 4x3 monitor, so keep that in mind. Whereas, something like an FW900, for example, it resolves around, if you calculate the dot pitch out to the viewable tube size, it comes out to around 1330p-ish. And that's just the mask. Like, you're not going to be able to resolve 1330p exactly on it just because you have spot size and focus to worry about in addition to the mask. But just for comparison, 1440i on that, you can pretty much barely see any of the interlacing artifacts, with the exception of on all interlacing on all monitors, the only artifact you will see 100% of the time, no matter what you do, is 1 pixel tall horizontal lines scrolling up and down. They'll kind of blink in and out just because it's skipping a field every now and then. That's about the only artifact that you'll always see all the time. Pretty much all of the rest of the artifacts are completely solved with higher resolution. Interlacing also unlocks many monitors' potential in terms of resolvability too. You can resolve a lot more detail on a monitor if you're not kicking right up to the maximum bandwidth that it can handle. So you're actually resolving more detail that way. In the Siemens monitor, it can resolve a whole lot more than the FW900. And so you really want to be mindful of how high you're driving that bandwidth so you can resolve as much of that as possible. It's an efficiency thing, You want to hit just before the diminishing returns point of the resolvability that you get from interlacing. A lot of people also seem to think that interlaced is like half the resolution of an equivalent progressive resolution, or that it has worse motion clarity or something like that. That's not the case at all. You can clearly see this by doing any interlaced resolution at 60 Hertz, pulling up UFO test. You'll see it looks clear. And it isn't half the resolution either, because your eyes are still getting the full amount of detail in both of the fields. You're not actually seeing half of a field at once. You're seeing the effects of two fields strobing quickly side by side, possibly, if the resolution isn't high enough, but you're not losing half of your detail by interlacing. That's just not how it works. But you definitely do want to go as high resolution as possible, that's for sure.
So this is going to be the big one. Obviously this monitor, even though it's black and white, has to have a max resolvable resolution, right? It's gotta. Now with this, obviously a mask is not going to be a factor, as previously stated multiple times. What is going to be the real factor here is the spot size and the bandwidth. The bandwidth will be a factor because as you slowly creep up towards the maximum that it can do, which is 500 megahertz, you can go over that, but it's not going to look good at all. The closer that you get to that, it's going to become blurrier and blurrier, which is why for these tests here that I'm going to show you, I did interlacing, because that effectively halves your bandwidth, so it doesn't really become a factor, and so it just becomes a matter of which the monitor can actually resolve that resolution based almost entirely on its spot size and its focus. Now there's a couple things that I need to clarify before we get into this, and that has to do with TVL and LOHR, because these are going to be two fundamental things when it comes to determining the maximum resolvable resolution of this monitor. TVL stands for television lines, and it is essentially a measurement of sharpness, but it is not indicative of your actual resolution. And when I say that, I mean in terms of like 1920 by 1440p. Like if you had a TV line count of 1440 and then you use that as like, oh, this is my maximum resolution, that's not how it's going to be. It is just simply a measurement of sharpness. Now, it's critical for me to make clear that TVL is supposed to be measured off a 1-to-1 ratio, so horizontally as wide as it is tall. So for 4x3, that means 75% of the horizontal screen size, while LOHR, which I will get to after this, is the entire horizontal area. After I explain a little bit more about what LOHR is and what it means, I'll go back to why this is actually a very important factor. Now, LOHR is actually something that does have to do with your actual resolution, and this stands for lines of horizontal resolution. Now, to determine the TV line count of this monitor, there is a test pattern that you use. Whatever number I get from that test pattern, I could then plug it into a certain equation to get my LOHR. And that equation is the TV line count multiplied by the aspect ratio of the tube. So if it was a 4x3 monitor, say I had 1,000 TV lines. If I multiply that by 4/3, if it was a 4x3 tube, then I would get roughly 1333.33 repeating, which means that given perfect convergence, focus, what have you, in a perfect world where that wasn't a factor, that would be your maximum resolvable horizontal resolution. So then plug that into like a 4x3 resolution calculator, and then you have roughly 1333 by 999, or like 1333 by 1000. It's obviously not like an exact 4x3 resolution, but you get what I mean. So in the context of it being this monitor where it's a native 3x4 display, what I would be doing is the LOHR equaling whatever TV line count I might get from the test pattern, which obviously we're about to get into, and then multiplying that by 3/4. Now, here's why this was an important factor. You see, since TVL is a 1x1 measurement, the amount of area that it would be taking up on a 4x3 display, if I show you with this little diagram right here, would be the same as it would on a 3x4 display. The difference between the two is that you're going to have some space horizontally on the 4x3 display, while on the 3x4 display, you're going to have vertical space. So if I was to multiply my measurement by 3/4, it's not going to do anything because there's no more horizontal space to take up. So I asked around and I looked into it a lot, and honestly I couldn't really figure it out. So for the sake of trying to be as accurate as possible and not spread any misinformation about the monitor, we're just going to go with the TV line count because that would still be correct in this scenario, but the calculation of the LOHR is just a little bit strange to the point where I'm not too comfortable throwing a number out that doesn't really seem to be too correct. Now if anybody does know a little bit more about this than me and like the other people that I've asked, feel free to leave a comment, explain why, just all the things if you know if it is possible to calculate the LOHR so we can determine a maximum resolvable resolution of this monitor. I will show after the test pattern that we did make checkerboard test patterns that give us a very rough estimate on what the max resolution might be. So it's not like we have nothing to go off of, but we just don't know a very precise number. But we do have a very rough estimate on what it could go up to. Now with that out of the way, this image I think was originally in either 16:9 or I think 21:9, but this one that I'm showing on screen is cropped to 4:3. Obviously the monitor is 3:4, so what I did was crop this image to 3:4. The 4:3 image has a resolution of 10,500 by 7875. So it is super high res, obviously to ensure that the actual quality of the image will not be a factor into anything at all. And obviously with it cropped to 3:4, the horizontal is going to go down a little bit. That is going to be 5,906 by 7875. Obviously the monitor is not going to be displaying a resolution that high, so I don't have anything to worry about in that regard. Now the main part I'm going to be focusing on is this section right here, because this is going to be where the lines are the most dense. The numbers next to the lines represent the TV line count. So for example, the 6 on the top right there represents 600 TV lines. The 14 would mean 1400 TV lines. Now to determine what the count would be based on this, as the lines go down and progressively become closer and closer, as soon as the separations in between them become indistinguishable, that is when your count is determined. So if where the 14 is, if that is around the point where it becomes blurry and indistinguishable, then that means I have a TV line count of around 1400. So let's throw this guy on the Siemens monitor and let's go see how high this thing can go.
Currently, this monitor is running at 2400 by 3200i at 60 Hz. This is to eliminate bandwidth being a variable, so that the monitor being blurry isn't a factor in what can be resolved. And as a bonus, it looks just like progressive at a resolution that high. As shown before, this is the test pattern that we will be using to determine the TVL count. Now, you can see here that, even at 20, the maximum the test pattern can do, the lines are completely distinguishable from each other. Since the resolvability of this monitor is clearly far beyond any public TVL test in existence, we'll need to think outside the box. One approach would be to make our own pattern, but that's hard and we don't know how to do that. Instead, I got a dumb idea. Just make the test pattern smaller. Easy. Now, here is the test pattern running at half the size. At this size, we'll have a much higher measurement to work with. Zooming into the lines again, however, we can see that the lines blur here and there. A little blurry at 16, becoming clear at 17 and 18, and seemingly cleared up again at 20. This means we need to run the monitor at an even higher resolution. The goal here is to find the bottleneck. A high resolution should eliminate that variable by ensuring the resolution is not the bottleneck. We now have the monitor running at 3072 by 4096i at 60 Hz, which, funny enough, is actually true 4K, unlike the fake-ass 4K Notes has been using to clickbait his videos. Once again, here is our test pattern. Running it at half the size once more, and zooming into the lines, we can finally determine our true TVL count. We can see as these lines go down, slowly but surely, they do become blurry and indistinguishable right here. Right before it hits 17, the individual line can still be distinguished, so let's call it 16. Of course, since this is being run at half the size, that number doubles to 32. This means that we have an approximate TVL count of about 3,200.
Alright, so now we're going to show the checkerboard test patterns that I was talking a little bit about earlier. So we have a couple of them that run at certain resolutions that match the monitor, and we're going to show how they work and how they give us a rough idea, not exact, but a rough idea of what the max resolution of this thing can be.
Yeah, these checkerboard patterns, I just make them in Photoshop, just 1 pixel for each dot, each square. Got to make sure it's pixel by pixel. They're useful for roughly determining the resolvability. You know, you just make a checkerboard pixel by pixel at whatever resolution you want to check, display it on screen, full screen at that resolution. And if you can see separations between the squares, then that means you're pretty close to resolving that. If you see hard edges, it's like, that's like a, you know, you're definitely resolving that. If you see any gap between the squares at all, that means the monitor is sharp enough to resolve at least that much detail. This checkerboard here is 3072 by 4096, and here is what it looks like on the screen. This one's 2160 by 2880, and this is what that looks like on the screen. This pattern is 2250 by 3000, and this is what it looks like. This one's 2400 by 3200, and this is what that looks like on the screen. The 2400 by 3200 pattern seems to be the closest to resolvable out of all these patterns. So I'd be pretty comfortable with saying it roughly resolves that, at least that level of detail. Also based.
Alright, so for the last part of this chapter, I'm going to be going through specific resolutions for this monitor, such as the highest possible resolution in both progressive and interlaced, and then stuff like the highest resolution plus highest refresh rate in progressive and interlaced, lowest resolution, stuff like that. I'll be saying what type of resolution it is when it's being displayed on screen, and I'll just be accompanying it with test patterns, content, etc. So here we go. So technically speaking, this is the highest progressive resolution I can do. Now I should state that this is only 138, well, only 138 kilohertz. The thing is, my DAC can only go up to around 540 megahertz. So if pixel clock wasn't an issue, I could technically do 6000p. I don't know if there's any way I can get a VGA out that would be like a gigahertz, or at least above 540 megahertz. But just know that these resolutions are as high as they are because of the limitation that comes from the pixel clock from my DAC. So, technically speaking, yes, with some of these I can go higher. So this is the highest progressive resolution plus refresh rate that I can do. So this tops out at 201 kilohertz, 169 hertz, trimmed down the vertical total a little bit to make it within the 200 kilohertz range. So this is not limited by pixel clock dash bandwidth. It is the actual limitation when it comes to the frequency of what this monitor can do. This is the lowest progressive resolution that I can do. Of course, even 480p at 169 Hz is not at 120 kHz, so I have to raise the vertical total. I can probably squeeze a little bit more out of the monitor, but I figured that this was enough. Although later I'll probably see the lowest that I can squeeze out of it just to get the biggest scan lines, because as you may be able to tell, they are fucking thick with how sharp the spot size is on this monitor. So this one's a little weird. It is the highest interlaced resolution that I can do on this monitor, but it is not because of the DAC or its pixel clock or the monitor's frequency. From what I can tell, it's like a driver thing or maybe a Windows thing. For some reason, I cannot go above 4200i, and so because the bandwidth and resolution isn't that high, I was able to at least run it at 60 Hertz, so you're not going to get a flicker or anything. It's going to match up with what my camera can sync to. But as of right now, this is as high as I can go, which does kind of suck because I can absolutely go higher if I didn't have this weird limitation. But regardless, this is 4200i, it still looks fucking nice. So this is the highest interlaced resolution that I can do with the maximum refresh rate. It's just double of 810 by 1080p at 169 Hertz. So it comes out to roughly 202 kilohertz. And then just like last time, I dropped the vertical total a little bit to get it within that range. And it looks really nice. It's actually a pretty pleasant resolution to use. Super high res and super high refresh rate. Who wouldn't want that shit? If only it was color. This is basically the lowest interlace resolution that I can do at the maximum refresh rate, of course, to increase the horizontal frequency. It's also not enough, so I gotta, just like the 480p one, increase the vertical total to 2000 or like around there to make it 120-ish kilohertz. It's a bit of a weird resolution, to be honest. It kind of looks cool. It's not really much to say on it. Alright, we're finally here at the best chapter, the content montage. Got a lot of things going to be showing here, so we're to strap in. It's going to be a pretty big ride for this one. And don't worry, this is far, far from the last you're going to see this monitor. I have a lot of different forms of content planned ahead for this thing, so we're still going to be doing lots of things. Thought it would be best to give the monitor an updated video in a little bit of a higher quality fashion to give it the attention it deserves before moving on to different forms of content with it. And by the way, just hinting, she does have a buddy that we're going to be taking a look at eventually. That's right, my friends. This shit's far from over. But anyways, that's for future videos. We're not talking about that guy just yet. And last thing, I want to give a thank you to Shank Mods and Slick for collaborating with me on this video. It was very fun to have them join me. Their YouTube channel links will be in the description. Check out their stuff, subscribe to them. And I'd also like to thank you for watching this video. I have been working on this thing for so many months, and my video editor is a giant pain in the ass. So it probably would have been around 2 months if it wasn't a pain in the ass, but you know, I gotta switch eventually. But without further ado, here it is. The big-ass content montage on the big-ass horizontal frequency black and white beast thing. Here we go.